mathematicians say that in Franklin's view, science doesn't produce moral progress at all because there's no such thing as moral progress, at least if by that progress we mean the settlement or resolution of these fundamental issues. They just, like whacking a mole, you know, pound it here and pound it there. I think Franklin might say to Mr. Bacon, well, here we are 400 years after your great books, and we're still faced by the fundamental conflict between reason and revelation. It's certainly the basic issue involved in all of the issues of the war on terror. If we're not back to the siege of Vienna, you know, I don't know where we are. And I mean, intellectually we are. And that's we're right back to the situation of the Enlightenment. Alas, we don't have wise Ben Franklin around today, but we've got lots of what he wrote, and I think we're well to turn to him for guidance whenever we need to or have a mind to, as we ride on what I think is the unstoppable train to vacant Atlantis. That's all. No, that he wasn't.
But the ultimate objective in all this?
Oh, well, the ultimate objective for Franklin was to get this straight in his own mind. He had really convinced himself that Hobbes.
So he was having a dialogue with himself,
yes,
to reconcile
yes,
what he thought. Okay.
Yes, he worked that through his entire literary and philosophical career. And he was also a practical man, an extremely practical man, and a great politician. Well, a mediocre electoral politician, but a great negotiator. And he constantly negotiated he helped negotiate and mediate the religious life of Pennsylvania, which was intimately involved with the political prospects of the colony. And he knew, and he knew, since he thought that ultimately our capacity as rational animals is what makes us such monsters. Okay? With reason, we can find a reason to do whatever the hell we decide we want to do. You know, I never heard of ethnic cleansing committed by wolves. They don't do things like that, you know? And that's because they don't have any sense of right and wrong, or good and bad, or the public good and all that. So he had such a deep sense of the rootedness of folly, not in evil, but in the bad construction of the human mind, that he was very keenly aware that folly could be expected from every quarter, and to navigate your way through politically through all of the forms of self-delusion and self-love and pride that human beings give themselves was a tall order for him. I'm sorry, what?
Is that like the Platonic forms, like this whole?
No. He didn't take that sort of thinking seriously. He didn't think metaphysical reasoning could get you anywhere. Franklin thought the only sensible way to think your way out of a problem was to examine your own most immediate and self-evident and obvious intuitions about that problem. That's where and that's why he never wrote a treatise. He didn't write a theoretical treatise. He wrote jokes. He wrote essays. He wrote platonic dialogue. He wrote a wonderful platonic dialogue called A Man of Sense, starring none other than Crito. And he gets Crito just right, because Crito is one of the stupidest characters in all of Plato's dialogues, and his Crito is even stupider. And it's very, very good. So yeah, no, he wasn't a sadistic man, but he was a hard-headed man. That's for sure. Yeah.
Did Franklin ever read or interact with any of the skeptics of the Enlightenment Project, like David Hume?
Oh, sure. He was good friends with him. Oh, yeah. All of them. He knew them all. When Franklin got dressed down in the hospital after the Hutchinson Letters affair, Hume and Priestley came to London to see the fight. Franklin commented that he felt like he had been at a bear baiting in front of his friends, and he was the bear. So yeah, he knew Hume very well, and he knew, the only one he didn't know, he never got to meet Newton. He wanted to, but he never did. But yeah, he used to hang out with the Fable of the Bees guy, Mandeville, at Mandeville's coffee house. And Mandeville took a shine to him. I mean, it was a 19-year-old kid. He was a genius, I mean. And Faraday said of Franklin that he was the second greatest scientist of that period after Newton, because his electrical experiments were earth-shattering. They really were. Anybody? Ah, yes.
It's probably not a fair question to ask, but if Franklin were alive today, do you think he would prefer to live in Europe or the United States?
Oh, USA. Except. It depended on where his love interest would be. One thing would have trumped is if Franklin, there was a famous philosopher, Helvetius, and Madame, who died, and his wife, Madame Helvetius, was one of the mistresses of the great salons in Paris. And Franklin fell in love with her and asked her to marry him, and she refused. If she had said yes, he never would have left Paris. He never would have come back to the United States, I don't believe. Because she wouldn't have come to the States, that would be unthinkable. But he would never have come back. But he lived about at least half of his adult life was spent in London and Paris. A lot. Yeah. But he was a big American, he was a big lover of corn dog America, you know. And he was a really important mediator in the religious politics of Pennsylvania, and I think affords us one of the most subtle investigations of what moral progress could mean and what the relationship is between modern science and that. Because the partisans of Hobbes, you know, and Bacon really wanted to defeat this power. And what Demestre said of Bacon is absolutely true. And Franklin just was very skeptical about all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Of course, I can't resist a view of what do you think of the Texas school board decisions?
Oh, he would have thought it was absurd. Yeah. Not the least of which what they probably have to say about him. Franklin was a great, I mean, he was such, you know, he loved to expose folly. He just loved it. And he did it lots. So he was the man who headed the commission that exposed Mesmer. You know, the mesmerizing and the wands. And he invented the double-blind experiment in order to do this. But then what did he do? Typical. He writes an essay about having exposed this ridiculous fraud. You know, and he says, well, but you know, there's always a good side to things. And he says, in a city like Paris, there's always hundreds and thousands even of hypochondriacs, and why shouldn't they get cured by thinking that they've been touched by a magic wand? They'll stop taking all these, wasting their money. So, you know, he never saw an issue where he couldn't look at it from the other side of the fence. At the height of the revolution, Franklin wrote what is really an almost scandalous piece, if you think about his position, because here he was, you know, the biggest and most important diplomat in the whole course of the revolutionary struggle. And he made up another one of these hoaxes about a cargo of scalps that had been intercepted, being sent from the Indian tribes who were allied with Britain to the king and Parliament for their refreshment. You know, they were going to use them as little baubles and hang them from there. and it describes the invoice in grotesque detail, how many children, how many gray hairs,